Hello there. There is a trap that many leaders fall into day in, day out. And when you fall into this trap as a leader, your credibility is undermined. This trap is a deliberate one. It is geared by the perpetrators towards undermining your leadership. And if you don't know how to do leadership right, you are certainly sure to fall into it. It is the trap of compliance. The trap of compliance. Leaders fall into it every day. Leaders undermine their people every day. Leaders who do not know what they are doing, who cannot differentiate between their left and their right, fall into this every day. And many leaders wonder why they are unable to make impact, why they cannot achieve effectiveness, why they can't muster influence. Well, this is one major reason that happens. Today, it's Olatunji Shobodu, and we are back on Leadership in 30 Minutes. Leadership in 30 Minutes. And, we want to examine an interesting riddle today. And so, I'll be looking at that broad topic, leadership unusual. Leadership unusual. But, I've also tried to examine it from this perspective that when you are faced with a trap, as most leaders are faced with from day to day, you need to bring out unusual approaches to leadership. Now, as unusual as they may be, they are not wrong. They are, in fact, the right thing to do, and to do on a regular, consistent basis. They are the way to lead. They are what your people are looking for. They point to the treatment that you must ensure that you give your people, and they identify what the first priority of a leader should be. So it promises to be an interesting time together this morning. And you may want to invite others to join you or share this video with others to essentially learn from it, to avoid the mistakes that other leaders, that undermine other leaders. And so this is coming to you from the stable of Emmet Leadership Academy, where I'm CEO and founder. And you know that at Emmet, our commitment is to leading by the truth. We nurture leaders based on truth. And truth for us is found in the Word of God, primarily. So we're going to take a trip there, and we're going to pull out an encounter to illustrate the point that I'd like to make today. And so if you come with me, we'll look at the story of that woman that was caught in adultery. And that story you would find in John chapter 8, all right, and from verses 1 to 12. John chapter 8, verses 1 to 12. So what transpired, there, what transpired there. Now, Jesus came into the temple as his practice was, and lo and behold, these so-called teachers of the law, these men and women who are believed to be well grounded in the law, who were looked up to as the leaders of their time, who had command of the rules, who supposedly knew how things ought to be done, how systems ought to run. They came to him, you know, uh, with excitement, but it was all a trap. They came to him bringing a woman, and they said to him, Master, all right, this woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. Master, and let's start from there. That's an acknowledgement, you know, of Jesus as a leader. That's probably why this is relevant to us when discussing leadership. Of course, we know he was a leader, we know he had his team, but he was not leading just his team. And whoever wanted to learn leadership needn't look at just how he conducted his affairs with his team. You also needed to look at, generally and in particular, how he interacted with the leaders of his time, with whom, by the way, he had a lot of issues because they were doing, the whole leadership thing very, very wrong. Very wrong. Okay, so they came in acknowledgement, of his status as a leader. And they said to him, Master, something has happened here. You'll be interested in it, in this. We need your guidance on this very serious matter. All right? Now, what was the matter? They said this woman was caught in adultery, in the very act. So there was that emphasis, in the very act. All right? That's like, look, I mean, there is no way that this woman can wriggle out. Okay? No way for this woman to wriggle out. We caught her by ourselves doing wrong. In fact, she was not just doing wrong, she was doing one of the gravest, she was caught in one of the gravest violations that anyone, could be caught in. And so they were asking him, well, when you catch a woman in a situation like this, the law, the rules of the company says this is what we must do. Says this is what we must do. She must be stoned to death. It said Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. All right. Now, stoned there means stoned to death. And then they said to him, so what do you say? And that's where the trap was. And we were told in that, rendition that they wanted to trap him. That was their motive. Their motive was to trap him. They found a situation where they could trap him. So this leader was faced with a trap. This leader was faced with a trap. Why is this considered a trap? Why is it considered a trap? Now, it's a trap because, first of all, it is true that they caught the woman in the very act. So they brought to him, as it were, somebody who had broken the rules, somebody who broke the law, somebody who broke company policy. All right? It is true. They saw the person. Okay? And that was what they derived boldness from. And they were even bolder by the fact that the second aspect of this whole issue was also true. That's the fact that Moses' law, which was in operation at the time, said when you find, a woman in a situation like this, she should be stoned. All right? She should be stoned. That's what the law says. So we found somebody clearly broke the law. And here we are. This is what the consequence of breaking that law is. And you are the leader. What do we say we should do? And what they wanted to say, to hear from Jesus, was a direct response that will say, forgive this woman, don't do anything. All right. They wanted him to say something that will prevent them or suggest that they should not obey the law of Moses. That's what they were looking for. That's the trap. Because then this leader would have been telling them directly, break the law, ignore the law. So imagine for the moment that in that your situation, in that your role as a leader, in the company, in the organization. So somebody has been found that's committed, a fundamental breach. And the policy provision, the sanction is clear. This person has to be dealt with. Maybe it's a summary dismissal, after which you hand the person over to the police, perhaps, if it's that kind of a crime. And so the people who never liked your leadership approach or the way you think about leadership rush to you, wanting you to suggest that they should ignore or disregard the policy. And what many leaders will do today is to fall into that trap. Well, they play safe, actually, which is the real trap, in fact. You see, they wanted to put this leader in trouble, and they thought they had set a trap. But in reality, if this leader had fallen into their trap, they all would have fallen into a much bigger trap, which we're usually not conscious of as leaders. All right? And we believe that compliance is everything. So I refer to this trap as the compliance trap. The compliance trap. And compliance is not everything. Compliance is not everything. We are not saying that the rules should be broken. Jesus wasn't saying the rules should be broken. But he made a very important point here, that the rules are not absolute. You must have heard people say that the law is made for men, and men are not made for the law. The law is made for people. People are not made for the law. What does that mean? That suggests to you that the law cannot be absolute. A leader does not place the law as absolute. All right? There is a greater interest to serve over and above the laws. The laws are made for men, to guide men. Yes, maybe to punish, transgression or violation or breaking of rules. But there are more important considerations for a true leader. And there is that trap that a leader must not fall into. All right? You can fall into this trap that they have set by escaping a much bigger trap that would actually make those who set the trap for you, their own trap for you, to look foolish, because they realize that there is a bigger, much bigger consideration. And so what transpired, and of course, Jesus didn't immediately respond to them. He knew that it was a trap. It was their own trap. But he understood that there was a bigger trap, a much bigger trap that they were not aware of. And that trap is the one that he should not fall into as a true leader. And that's the trap you should not fall into as a true leader as well. So let's examine what it is. Look at what he did. Now he looked up and he started writing, and down again, and he did as if he was writing something on the ground. Now the people were not looking at what he was writing. They didn't take interest in that. They were consumed by their, ensuring that their trap succeeded. And then he made a statement that threw everyone, aback. He said, whoever is not without sin among you, let him be the first to throw the stone. Whoever has never violated policy among you, whoever has never broken the rules among you, let him be the one, let her be the one to throw the stone, to first cast the stone. Wait a minute. He wasn't saying, don't obey the law of Moses. He was saying, please go ahead and obey the law of Moses. Cast the stone. But ensure that before casting the stone, that you have never broken the rules. He didn't make any reference to whether or not you committed adultery, what kind of rules you broke. Maybe you did something else, whether it is huge, whether it is, insignificant. He said, whoever has not sinned, he wasn't interested in what the nature of the sin. It was not important. He said, please go ahead and obey the law of Moses, obey the rules of the company, provided you have not. Or if you like, please think about whether or not you have ever broken the rules. Think about it if you are going to throw the stone. And then something happened. All the people who are ganged up, who had set the trap, on hearing that, they began to disappear one after the other. The heavy men, experienced, corporate people began to disappear one after the other. Those who knew the details of the law, those who understood the company policy from cover to cover, those who had, operated in the environment for years, began to disappear. No one was bold enough to throw the stone. No one could beat his or her chest and say, well, I have not sinned, so I'm going to throw the stone. So it would appear to implement the company policy, having examined where they stood in terms of compliance with the law generally. And then at a point, he looked up, from bending down to write, and he discovered there was no one. And he asked the woman, so what's going on here? Has anyone condemned you? Where are the people accusing you? Where are the leaders who wanted you to be punished for what you had done? Where are the people who are trying to set me up against the laws of the company, the policies of the company? He said, are they not condemning you anymore? And she said, no. And she said, well, and he said, well, okay, if they're not condemning you, I also am not condemning you. But go and make sure you never sin again. Don't do this anymore. Don't do this anymore. Unusual leadership. Or if you like, leadership unusual. Unusual leadership. Unusual leadership. What happened? The people who wanted to implement the policy, where are they? Is it that suddenly the policy doesn't exist again? Why are they not as eager anymore to bring down the weight of the policy on the violator? Isn't that what a leader should do? They thought they had a trap, but there was an even greater trap. And Jesus actually helped them. This leader helped them not to fall into that trap in this one instance. And what is that trap? That trap is the fairness trap, or if you like, the injustice trap. That's what I refer to as the first law of leadership. The first law of leadership. What you want to do as a leader is to be fair and just. Equity is important. Equity is number one in terms of the priority of true leaders. Jesus said something in Matthew 23 and verse 23. You want to look at it. When you observe the way these characters who projected themselves as leaders but were hypocrites and frauds, he said to them, he said, gentlemen, you like to, pay tithe, of the stuff that you plant in your private gardens. I mean, you are that meticulous. You want to obey, the law on tithing. You go to that extent to take note of the things you planted in your private garden, not even in your major commercial enterprise. He said, but there's a mistake that you're making. There's something that you're overlooking. Said you neglect the weightier matters of the law. This same law, this same Moses law, it says there are weightier matters beyond compliance. That's what he was telling them. You like to feign compliance, but you miss the most important things. And he was referring to that from a leadership point of view. Every time he spoke to them, he was referring to them as leaders. They were the leaders of the time, just like we have many leaders today. But hypocrisy remains a major issue. It remains a major issue. And that's what he was drawing their attention to. And what are those? So there are more important things than compliance. And to focus on compliance is a trap. But the greater trap for a leader is not to understand that there are more important things. He called them the weightier matters of the law. He was referring to the more important principles by which you do leadership. The principles that make you do leadership right, that project you as a true leader. And that's what you and I need to pay attention to. And he was kind enough to mention three things there: weightier matters, weightier principles. And he talked about justice, which is fairness, equity to this language. He talked about mercy, which is forbearance, which is understanding, showing understanding into this language. And he talked about faith. And he talked about faith. So I say that fairness comes before compliance. Before compliance. You're not eager to catch people doing wrong. It's not that you are supporting them to do wrong. He said to this woman, he said, go and sin no more. He was stern. That's what he wanted. But he followed the right approach, not an approach, all right, that was motivated by wrong considerations, by hypocrisy. So fairness comes before compliance. Understanding, showing understanding as a leader comes before compliance. Having faith in your people comes before compliance. Said you are not supposed to be looking out for the destruction of your people. You are supposed to be looking out for how to correct the shortcomings of your people. That's why we are told that policies, rules, laws, they are made for men. Men are not made for them. The idea isn't to destroy. But when you emphasize compliance is to destroy, is to work against the interest of the people, when you should be working for your people. Leaders work for their people, not against them. Leaders, a true leader is not looking to identify when the people make a mistake so that they can say, yes, you have been caught, and then to deal with that. When more times than not, the same leader has made such mistakes in the past, and the leader has not been destroyed. The leader has still grown. The leader has still, climbed the career ladder. That's why the leader is able to lead. If he or she had been destroyed when he or she made the mistake years before, how would she have gotten into the position to lead others? Now that you're in a position to lead others, why is it that you believe that others should not make any mistake? And why are you looking out just to observe when they make mistakes and to breathe down upon their neck to destroy them, when your calling as a leader is to develop people? He said, follow me and I will make you, not I will destroy you. You are not called as a leader to destroy your people. You are called as a leader to build up your people. Paul was saying in Acts 20 and verse 32, he said, I commend you to God and to the word of this grace, which is able to build you up and to give you your inheritance among the saints. You see, it's a positive outlook towards the people that he had been given responsibility for. I'm showing you the things that will help to build you up, not to destroy you, and to give you your inheritance. That is, the input of leadership is value. Is value. What's the value here in catching a woman, bringing her, and trying to use her as an example, holding on to Moses and all of that stuff, as if that's the most important thing? What he was saying, what Jesus was drawing their attention here is this: there is a difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. It is true what Moses said. It is true. That's the provision. But Moses wasn't his intention, and the intention of God who gave him that law was not to use it to destroy people, was not to take the law and be looking for out for people who were committing adultery. That was not the spirit. All right? That was not the spirit. The primary consideration was not destruction. The primary consideration was to build people up. That's why later in John, I believe it's John 8 and verse 51, when Jesus was saying something to them, he was telling them about the same Moses. In fact, he was telling them now about Abraham. All right? And he told them, he said, before Abraham was, I am. Said, before Abraham was, I am. So let's not even start talking about Moses. Let's not even start talking about Moses. So it was saying, look, I understand the issues. I understand the reason behind the law. I was there when it was given. This is not the idea. They didn't expect that. They didn't see it coming. And they knew that what he said was the right thing, because if it was not, they would have taken it up. They would have deemed themselves successful, and they would have shouted, they would have cried, they would have drawn attention, they would have gone ahead to say, yes, this man is encouraging people to break the law. And we can't have that kind of person as a leader. They would have discredited the person. So look at the way you have been conducting and how much you are falling into this unfortunate trap. The trap to use the law, to use the policies of the company to breathe down the neck of your people under the guise of compliance. Compliance is not the most important thing. Compliance does not necessarily bring about a change. And it should tell you, because we also told, until Jesus came, no one could fulfill the law. None. But how many people were destroyed? Because if the essence of the law was to destroy people, then Jesus wouldn't have needed to come and help out anybody, because everyone would have been destroyed. So that was not the intention. That was not the intention. The spirit behind it was to show that you and I are weak in our capacity to follow rules, and that a lot more work is required. A lot more help is required for us to behave the way we should behave. And those rules cannot help. Those rules are helpful in showing that we are transgressors. We're not doing the right thing. But the first disposition of a leader should not be to visit the weight of the law on the transgressor. Because then the leader won't be fair. Why wouldn't the leader be fair? Because if the leader had never transgressed, not in that situation, not when everybody's looking, not while the leader was also where the follower is today, then maybe the leader would have a justification to execute the so-called law or the so-called rules. But as you see in this instance, everybody disappeared. Everybody disappeared. Because none of them could say, well, I've never been found wanting. Everyone has been found wanting. And the leadership journey is work in progress, primarily for the follower and indeed for the leader. Because even as a leader, there are still occasions where I mean, and these were leaders who themselves were walking in transgression, who themselves, when they sat down to think about their own conduct, maybe even right there and then they could see that they are doing things just like the person that they have brought forward. That's why their conscience couldn't hold up. That's why none of them, in spite of the fact that they caught this person red-handed, that's why they could not stay. I mean, how come you caught this person red-handed and you could not stay? And by the way, like some people would, I have had cause to identify before. It takes two to tango. I mean, one woman doesn't just commit adultery, and there's supposed to be two people. But here were men who were quick to bring one woman out, and you said you caught her in the very act. Okay, so where was her accomplice? Where is her accomplice? Where is the person that she was caught in the act with? Why did you bring only one person? You ought to have brought two people. If you wanted to really, execute the law, you ought to have brought two people. So the same people who made us believe that they were trying to enforce compliance were also breaking the law, because they came with one person when two people were caught in the act. When two people were caught in the act, they came with one person. They wanted one person punished. How fair is that? Is that the spirit of the law? So they were walking in hypocrisy. One, because there were two people, they came with one person, made it look as if the one person was, the real culprit. Secondly, they came pointing accusing fingers, wanting to pick out the speck in somebody's eyes when they had a log in their eyes. For everyone to have walked away meant that each one could identify, could think of at least one thing, one violation of the same law. Maybe not the same component of the law, but at least they could think of one violation that ought to have fetched them a sanction. And that sanction had not been implemented against them yet. So you see that they only succeeded in setting a trap for themselves. And the trap that they thought they set up for the leader wasn't the true trap that a leader ought to avoid. A leader ought to avoid the trap of injustice as a matter of priority. As a matter of priority. That's why when you look at God, when you look at Jesus, who carried the nature of God, perhaps the most important attribute of God is that he's fair. Repeatedly, we're told that he has no respect of persons. He doesn't operate by favoritism. He treats everyone equally. And that's what Jesus was trying to do here. In fact, you also look at that famous counsel, do to others as you expect to be done to you. You see the reason why they could not stand? That's what the statement that Jesus made was conveying to them. He said, well, you want to throw this stone. Make sure you have not done something that ought to have qualified you for the same treatment before now. Because if you did something that should have, fetched you, the same treatment, well, then why, and that was not carried out, why are you so bent on destroying somebody just because yours was not, you weren't caught? And you see, he wasn't asking them. He didn't even say, if you have never been caught, all right? He gave that responsibility to the individual. He was saying, if you have never caught yourself doing wrong, then go ahead. That it shouldn't take, somebody coming, an external person. No, if you have never caught yourself doing wrong, please go ahead and implement the company policy. So they could never say that he didn't. He was against company policy, that he was saying they couldn't, implement company policy. That's not what he was saying. He didn't say that. They failed woefully there. He only told them, remember that company policy does not apply to one person. It applies to all of us. So please, and I suppose that there must have been a time or the other when you violated company policy. Can you remember what treatment was given to you? Were you killed as a result? Or did somebody give you the benefit of the doubt? Or maybe you weren't even discovered. Is that what gives you the boldness now to say some other person should be given this extreme treatment? So if you are a leader that is worth your salt, if you're a leader who is true and wise, you shouldn't fall into this trap. If you have been falling into it, which I suspect, hopefully you know what to do. The law is not primary. The policy, and unfortunately these days there is so much emphasis on compliance in the corporate setting. Compliance. We've upgraded it so much to a level where we are virtually relying on compliance to get people to behave in the way that they should. Let me suggest to you that it will fail the same way that these people failed. Why? Because compliance does not build character. That's the truth. Leaders build character. Compliance does not build character. If you are relying on compliance to build character, you will be perpetually disappointed. That's why, in spite of all of the efforts on compliance, capital markets and all the regulators are making, we're still finding heinous violations across, the corporate world, across different strata of society, even today. Why? I'm not surprised. We're putting the cart before the horse. I'm not surprised. We're turning our priorities on their heads. I'm not surprised. We are not taking leadership responsibility. It's leadership through the development and the building of character that will result in the kind of compliance that you want. We're going to the failure that is being so obvious, which is that the law cannot make anyone to behave properly. That was not the purpose. The purpose was to show that we need help in order to learn how to properly behave. And that help is found in leadership. So if there is one reason that Jesus showed up and did everything that he did, don't forget that he showed practical, powerful, true leadership. So much so that the people that he groomed were now able to act with the right character. They didn't need anybody to breathe down on their neck about compliance. They were compliant. Why? Because they observed the weightier matters of leadership: fairness, forbearance, and faith. Fairness, forbearance, and faith. Fairness, forbearance, and faith. They're more important than compliance. Compliance is the lot, is the game of hypocrite leaders. It's the game of hypocrite leaders. But true, authentic leaders are not playing a compliance game. They are not looking to observe when you are failing, when you are breaking the rules. They don't encourage breaking the rules, but they have a better way of developing you into the kind of character, into the kind of personality who has compliance as a standard core attribute. That's what leadership is about. That's what leadership is about. And that's the point that we'd like to make today. Leadership unusual. They couldn't understand, Jesus' approach. They thought they had everything worked out and they were going to box him into a corner. And there is no one that could fault his approach here. No one could fault his approach. No one could say anything contrary to what he has said. Why? Because he operated by the truth. He operated by the truth. Now that I've said that, that reminds me, of my book. You must have been seeing The Scroll, all right? That's my book. It's titled, Does This Offend You? Okay. Sorry about the, effect there. Does these offend you? Okay. Does these offend you? It talks about the truth. And you can get a copy of it using the link that is scrolling on the screen. It talks about the commitment of leaders to truth. All right. And the power of truth for handling today's tough leadership realities. You would agree with me that the situation we've discussed this morning is a tough leadership reality. It's a tough reality. It's a tough reality, But Jesus was easily able to navigate by just upholding the truth, not the law. The truth, not the law. Your company policy, your demand for compliance is not truth. All right? It's not truth. That's the letter that you are following, not the spirit. And guess what? The spirit gives life. All right? But the letter kills. The letter kills. If you want to follow the letter, you will destroy the people as a leader. And that's not your calling as a leader. Your calling is to enhance the people, is to build the people up. It is not to destroy them. It is not to destroy them by any means. All right? The spirit gives life. So this woman was spared. Now you think this woman with this encounter would go back and just fall into the same thing again? No, she had an encounter of a lifetime. Someday I'm going to talk about the kind of effect that what she observed, the kind of lesson that she learned, all right, what it will have, the impact it will have on her. We'll talk about it someday soon, maybe as a second part of, this focus, Leadership Unusual, because it's the way to go. That's the kind of person to go and look for. Haven't gone through that kind of situation, by the time, she's done, she will be a great leader indeed. A great leader indeed. Compliance, you won't ever have to worry. She'll be an upright leader, because the very, very powerful lessons that she's learned here, very significant impact that this exposure, has had on her. And it would be nice to look at that. We've taken some time today. I hope that you've had a great time. Don't forget, check out the book. Don't forget, give comments, share comments with us, share the link. Let's come together. Let's examine, how to do leadership right, based on proven truths. All right, from the Bible. That's what we do at the Emmet Leadership Academy. My name remains Olatunji Shobodu, and it's been a pleasure leading this discussion this morning. See you again next week, Thursday. But don't forget, on Monday, take delivery of your leadership nugget. And in a moment, I'm bringing you a special edition at the top of the hour, a special edition of Leadership in 30 Minutes. And we'll be bringing our first guest, and that would be in a couple of minutes. Hope you will join us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and God bless you. Bye-bye.